After my initial shock at this news, I was taken to the staff room, and after sipping on some much-needed water, matron and my nursing friends all gathered round, all talking at once. The wreck was only discovered 5 days ago? How could that be, when Adam had been writing to me for nearly 3 months after being found? I was having so many mixed emotions: anger, deep sadness, and grieving at the reality that my Adam must have perished. Who was this man writing to me? Who was the man turning up at the hospital? Why was I having these visions of Adam calling out to me, standing over my bed? After much debate and feeling so worn out and exhausted, I had to finally accept that the Adam who had been writing to me was obviously an imposter. Somehow he must have found out about Adam, been a friend, an acquaintance, or served with him. Something. He somehow knew about Adam and I, and had possibly read our letters. He must have read our letters. But how could that be, if the wreckage had only just been found? Who made the call to the hospital when matron answered the telephone? My head was spinning and I felt very faint. 2 of my friends took me home and stayed with me while I drifted off into a very troubled sleep. So many questions and no answers. But I was determined to get to the bottom of this and find out the truth about what happened to Adam. Being in wartime and also in a completely different country, I knew it was going to be tough and very difficult, but I had to find out. I was already grieving for the loss of the man I loved so deeply, the man who I had planned to spend the rest of my life with. I was inconsolable, but also I knew I had to know for sure. The very first thing I did when I awoke was to write off to Adam's parents. I knew that they would have to have been informed about Adam. I had no idea how long it would take to hear back from them, or even if I would. After all, if this news was true, they would be grieving. I just had to pray with everything I had in me that I would hear back from them. My next decision was how to approach this man who was writing to me pretending to be Adam. If I came right out and accused him, he could potentially be scared off and not ever contact me again, and this would be fine with me. But firstly, I had to know who he really was, and why he was doing this, and how he came across information about Adam and myself. I had to know everything, and I also had to word my letter in a way that would not frighten him off. I made myself a cup of tea and began to write, my hand shaking as I did so. I told him that I had been informed that Adam's plane wreck had only just been discovered by US military search and rescue several days ago. I told him that I knew he couldn't possibly be Adam. I begged him to please tell me everything, that if he had any kindness in him at all, that he would tell me what I needed to know so that I could try to understand, and his knowledge of anything to do with Adam could help me begin to heal. It was a long letter. My words were kind and gentle, even though I was filled with anger, despair, and grief. I placed the letter in the mailroom at the hospital for the next cargo plane out, wondering if I would ever get a response. Part of me desperate for a reply, and part of me not ever wanting to see a letter from this man again. But I knew if I was ever able to move on with my life, I had to hear back from him, from this cruel imposter, and read what he had to say. I headed for my ward and greeted my patients, trying to look and act as normal as possible. My friend was expecting another letter from her American soldier, just to see if there was any more news on what was found in the wreckage, and if anyone had survived. He had to be careful though, who he spoke to when asking questions, as security was strict and family members of any survivors or deceased were a high priority. As Adam and I were not married, nor even engaged, I was not on anyone's priority list for information. News of the war was all anyone talked about. The devastation and the loss of so many lives took precedence over anything else. Some rays of hope also perked everyone up with news reports that a ceasefire may be imminent. But we had heard this before, so we didn't really rely on these reports any longer. Not until it was officially announced, and who knew when that would be. I went about my days and nights in a blur, eager for any mail, but also dreading what may arrive. My thoughts were constantly on Adam. I called out to him in my dreams, and awoke most nights drenched in perspiration and visions of Adam calling back to me. I kept his letters in a box and reread them over and over. They comforted me, but the letters from this other man I kept in a separate box, and those ones I could not bring myself to touch. The weeks dragged by with no letters, no reply from Adam's parents, nothing from my friend's American soldier, and nothing from the man pretending to be Adam. I was gaunt and found it impossible to smile, to laugh, to make plans. I was in immense despair. After dragging myself home from another long and tiring shift at the hospital, I stopped and stared at what was sitting on my front veranda. All I saw was a bright golden glow of yellow. I hesitantly edged closer, not believing my eyes. There, in a huge basket, was what appeared to be dozens of yellow roses. I dropped to my knees, frantically searching for a note, a card, a letter, anything. But there was only the roses. Beautiful yellow roses. I looked around, but I didn't see anyone. I quickly unlocked my door and gathered all the flowers up and placed them so carefully on the dining table, just staring at them with no notion of what to do. Before I knew it, I was racing out the door and headed for my best friend's house to bring her back and show her. Terrified that once we arrived back at my place, that the roses would have disappeared and that it was all a figment of my imagination. But there they were, glorious, perfume-filled yellow roses, just where I placed them. My friend was stunned, and she couldn't even speak for a moment or two. We both searched again, everywhere, outside, inside, to see if a note had possibly blown away or placed anywhere else on the veranda. But no, there was nothing. Filled with excitement and also a sense of foreboding, we talked and talked well into the night, trying to figure this out. But eventually she had to get home, as she had an early start in the morning. I didn't want to be alone, so I curled up on the couch and turned the radio on, and there was my favourite song being played. What was this? First the roses, and then, coincidentally, my absolute favourite song playing on the radio, the song Adam Knows How Much I Love. I drifted off to sleep, and for the first time in a long while I slept with a smile on my face and hope in my heart. I woke up early and the roses were still there. It wasn't a dream. I only prayed that the roses were not from the man pretending to be Adam. But why would he send yellow roses when he seemed to think that pink roses were my favourite? Why would he just send roses and not respond to my letter? Once again, the never-ending questions flowed through my tormented brain, and I trundled off to work. The nurses were all smiles after being told about the roses that were delivered to me, and all of them came up with a different scenario, none of which made any sense, but I appreciated their input, and most of all, their friendship. It was when I returned home that my stomach turned to knots, and filled with anxiety once again, I slowly pulled the letter out of the mailbox. I knew it was not from Adam. Not the real Adam, anyway. I lowered myself onto the couch and began to read.
My dearest Grace, I knew in my heart this day would come. I always dreaded it, but knew my dream of being your Adam was a fantasy, but something I so wished would come true. I never wanted to hurt you. I will now tell you everything and hope that some small part of you will understand, and in time you can forgive me for what I am about to say. You are right. I'm not Adam. My name is Sam, but I want to assure you that everything I wrote to you I meant from the bottom of my heart. My platoon was under attack. We took heavy casualties, and by some miracle, I was the only one to escape the onslaught of enemy bullets. I lost all my buddies and was injured myself, but managed to escape the carnage. I had lost radio contact with my command post, and I was wandering around in unknown territory with no means of calling for help. It was then that I saw something off in the distance, something glinting in the sunlight, something metal. It was a plane wreck, a United States DC-6 plane that had been shot down. I approached with caution and came across a sight I'll never forget. Burnt, mangled bodies of the men on board. I was in shock and deeply saddened at seeing my comrades had perished. Then I heard a labored breathing and movement from one of the men. I climbed over to see clearly that this man was in grave trouble. His body and uniform bore the scorch marks of fire, but miraculously he was still clinging to life. Without thinking, I lifted him up, hearing him groan in pain. But I needed to get him out of the plane. After checking him over, I realized that he most likely would not survive these injuries. All I could do was to carry him and see how far we could get. By the grace of God, I came across a village. A woman who spoke no English rushed up to me, took one look at the man I was carrying, and ushered us both inside a hut. I laid the man down as she fetched some water. I searched his pockets for any form of ID, as his tags were not on him. That's when I pulled out a couple of letters and a photo of a beautiful woman. I sat down and began to read the letters, hoping to find out some information on the man's identity. I learned the man's name was Adam, and your name was Grace. I instantly thought, what a beautiful name for a beautiful woman, and I became obsessed, wanting to know more. I decided to head back to the wreck to see if there was anything else. It wasn't all that far, and I could make it in half a day. Gesturing to the villager helping Adam that I would return soon, that I would try to get help. I found the wreck and cautiously looked around, not wanting to disturb those who had perished, out of respect. I found a satchel, but not much more, and then sat nearby and went through it. Inside were more letters from you, as well as what seemed to be his parents. I felt guilty, but I had to read them. This is how I learned so much about you and about Adam's life. Unforgivable of me, but it was like something overtook me, and I just stepped into Adam's existence. I couldn't help it. My love for you grew with every letter I received, and I didn't know how to stop the deceit. I wanted you to be mine. The shame I feel is overwhelming, but not one part of me regrets writing those words to you, because, dear Grace, I meant every word I wrote. I now have to admit the worst thing I did, or rather, what I didn't do. In my heart and my head, you were mine. I never went back to the village where Adam was left. I thought for sure he would succumb to his injuries. I kept walking, and days later I came across another soldier command post. I reported what happened to my platoon, but Grace, I didn't report finding the plane wreck. I'm sickened at my selfish action, and I know that I will be punished one way or another for my cowardice. I knew that eventual search and rescue would find the remains of the plane. I just didn't know it would take so long, and I never heard any mention of Adam once they did find it. They said there was one man missing from the squadron. I knew this was Adam, and once again I wanted to tell them, but I couldn't bring myself to do so. I was shipped off to a hospital for my minor injuries, and that's where I continued to write to you. I was then sent home on leave. I could not get you out of my head. I desperately wanted to meet you. There is one more thing, Grace. When I searched through Adam's satchel, I found a half-written letter he was in the middle of to you. I have enclosed the letter for you. I am so sorry, Grace. I hope one day you can forgive me. Sam.
Even though deep down I already knew this was not Adam, the shock struck me like lightning. I couldn't take it all in. I broke down in tears, and it was a long time before I gathered up the courage to read my Adam's final letter.
My darling Grace, we're just about ready to fly off on a dangerous mission. I'm hoping I have time to finish this letter and put it in the mail drop before I leave. I reach out to you 1,000 times a day, and although you're not physically in reach, I always feel your warm, comforting embrace. I can still smell your perfume, and the thought of you brings me such joy, knowing we will be together soon, God willing. I can't wait to take you in my arms and lead you onto the dance floor while the band plays your favorite song. I love you, Grace, and once this mission is over,
I sobbed harder, uncontrollably, and clutched on for dear life to this one last piece of my Adam. I sat back and fell into a deep unconsciousness, not caring if I ever woke up at this time. But as I drifted into a deep, uneasy sleep, I knew I was going to search for Adam.